The oven timer chirped at exactly 4:47 p.m., and I remember thinking that was the last sound that belonged to me before everything came apart. 3 minutes early. The pecan tart shells weren't ready, the cranberry orange relish was still bleeding pink into the white bowl, and somewhere in the dining room, my mother-in-law was telling someone, in that voice she used when she wanted to be overheard, that she had hoped for more refined linens this year. I'd ironed those linens at 6 that morning. 3 hours of pressing French double-stitched napkins because she had once, in passing, said the ones I used the year before had a certain motel quality. I'd written it down in a small notebook I kept in the drawer beside the spice rack. I wrote down most things she said, not because I was angry, because I had a feeling even then that I would need them someday. Christmas Eve, 1:47 in the afternoon when the first guest arrived. 12 people coming for dinner. A house I'd cleaned for 2 days. A glazed ham, a standing rib roast, a vegetarian Wellington for my husband's cousin who'd recently decided meat was violence. 3 pies. 4 sides. A cheese course because my mother-in-law had once mentioned, again in passing, that a proper Christmas table includes a cheese course, dear. But you wouldn't have grown up knowing that. I had grown up in a single-wide trailer in eastern Tennessee. My mother worked 2 shifts at a hospital laundry. We ate Christmas dinner off TV trays and watched Bing Crosby on a television with a hanger for an antenna. And it was the warmest Christmas of my entire life. I'm 31 now. I tell you this so you understand the math of what I'm about to describe. My name is Linnea. People call me Linny when they're being kind and Linnea when they're being formal. And my mother-in-law Octavia called me dear, the way other women call cab drivers buddy. 7 years of marriage, 7 Christmases at the Halverston Quinn Estate in Litchfield County, Connecticut. A house that looked like it had been clipped out of a magazine and pasted into a hillside, with a 6-stall stable nobody used and a wine cellar nobody opened and a kitchen with 2 wolf ranges that nobody but me ever cooked in. My husband's name was Brom Halverston Quinn. The hyphen was non-negotiable. His mother had explained that to me at our rehearsal dinner in the powder room while I was trying not to throw up from nerves. "We don't drop the Halverston," she'd said, dabbing her lipstick. "Halverston's built half of Hartford." I'd nodded. I'd been 24. I'd thought she was joking. So back to the kitchen. The oven timer chirped, and I pulled the pecan shells out and rotated them, and I heard the front door open, and a voice I didn't quite recognize said, "Octavia, sweetheart, look at this hallway, it's like walking into a Christmas card." I set the tray down. I wiped my hands on the apron my husband had given me for our 2nd anniversary, a Williams-Sonoma apron, navy blue, my initials embroidered in cream. He'd been very proud of it. He'd said, "Now you look like a real wife." I had laughed at the time. I thought he was teasing. I stepped into the hallway just enough to see her. A woman in a forest green wrap dress, blonde hair done in that messy on-purpose way that costs $400 at a salon in the city. She was carrying a poinsettia in a brass pot. She handed it to Octavia, and Octavia kissed her on both cheeks, and Octavia said, "Welcome home, darling. You remember the layout, of course?" The woman laughed. How could I forget? I went back to the kitchen. I checked the ham. I checked the Wellington. I told myself I had misheard. I told myself I was tired. I'd been up since 5. I'd cried twice already that week, once over a pie crust that wouldn't roll out, and once because Bram had said, when I'd asked if he'd remembered our anniversary, our 7th, in October, he'd said, "Linny, I have a lot on my plate right now, can we please not?" I went back to the relish. I told myself it was a stranger. The other guests arrived in waves. Bram's brother and his wife and their 2 girls in red velvet. His father, a tall, silent man named Sterling, who had shaken my hand at our wedding and called me young lady every Christmas since, with no apparent malice and no apparent affection. His Aunt Felicity, who once asked me at brunch which trailer park I'd grown up in, just for context. And the cousin, the Wellington cousin, whose name was Tilda, and who actually was kind in her own confused way, and who had once whispered to me in a hallway, "Octavia is a lot. I'm sorry." And the blonde woman, whose name, it turned out, was Marisette Dupré. She was an interior designer. She had grown up 2 estates over from the Halverston Quinns. She had dated Brahm in high school and then again in college and then apparently again last spring. I learned the last part later. I'm getting ahead of myself. We sat down to dinner at 6 p.m. I had set the table for 12 with my own grandmother's china. The one beautiful thing I'd inherited, hand-painted pink roses on cream, made in Bavaria sometime before the war. My grandmother had wrapped each piece in newspaper and given them to me the summer I graduated college. She'd said, "Don't save these for special, baby. Every meal you eat is special if you eat it on something pretty." Octavia had once asked me in front of company if my china was thrifted. I had said, "No, ma'am, it's my grandmother's." And she had said, "Oh, well, that's almost the same thing, isn't it? 12 plates. The candles lit. The standing rib roast on a silver platter that had belonged to Bram's great-grandmother, which Octavia had presented to me at our wedding with a long speech about the responsibility of stewardship. The implication being that I was renting it. Bram stood up. He had a glass of champagne in his hand. I remember the way the candlelight caught the bubbles. I remember Octavia smiling at him, a little proud, the way she always did. I remember thinking, oh, he's going to toast Christmas, how sweet. He cleared his throat. "Family," he said. "Friends. There's no easy way to do this, and I've thought about waiting until after the new year, but Marisette and I both agreed it would be more honest to be open with everyone. Here, tonight, in the room that's mattered most to my life." The room. "I want you to understand," he didn't say "with the people who matter." He said, "in the room." Like the dining room was the witness. Like I wasn't even worth being looked at. "Linnea and I will be divorcing in the new year," he said. "It's been a long time coming. We both deserve a chance to grow into who we're meant to be. And Marisette," he turned to her and she smiled up at him with what I can only describe as the patience of someone who has been waiting for this exact moment since spring. "Marisette has agreed to move into the carriage house in March while we transition. We didn't want any of you to be surprised." Octavia clapped. Genuinely. A small, delighted clap like a woman watching a magic trick conclude. "Oh, Brammy," she said. "Finally. Finally, dear. I've been holding my breath." The Wellington cousin made a sound. "Tilda." A small, wounded, "Oh." Sterling looked at his plate. Marisette reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "My hand." She said, "I just want you to know, Linnea, there's no animosity here. We can all be adults about this. The house is big enough for everyone, for now. The house is big enough for everyone. I want to tell you that I screamed. I want to tell you that I picked up the silver platter and threw it through the bay window into the snow. I want to tell you that I said something devastating, something I'd rehearsed in a dream. I didn't. I sat very still. I felt my heart do a thing I didn't know hearts could do, a kind of slow folding, like a piece of paper being creased very carefully along a line that had always been there. I looked at Bram. I looked at Octavia. I looked at the candlelight on my grandmother's china. Then I smiled. I did. It wasn't a brave smile or a kind one. It was just the smile of a woman recognizing finally, with full clarity, what she had been looking at for 7 years. I stood up. I took off the navy apron with my initials on it, the one Bram had given me, and I folded it neatly on the back of my chair. I picked up my water glass, not the wine, the water, and I took a small sip. "Octavia," I said. My voice was even. I was almost surprised by it. "Thank you for opening your home to me for 7 Christmases." Her smile faltered, just a little. She had been expecting tears. She'd been hoping for them, I think. "Bram," I said. "Marisette." Marisette looked uncertain for the first time. She said, "Linnea, please sit down, let's eat, this doesn't have to be." "I'm not hungry," I said. "Tilda, the Wellington is in the warming drawer, the mushroom gravy is in the small saucepan, low heat, don't let it scorch." Tilda nodded. She was crying. I walked into the kitchen. I picked up my purse from the hook by the pantry. I took my keys, not the keys to my car, which was a Lexus Bram had bought me, but the keys to a different car, a 2012 Honda Civic I had kept in a long-term parking lot in Hartford for the last 4 years. I had paid the storage fee in cash every month. My mother had taught me that. Always have a car nobody else knows about. I took my coat. I took the small leather bag I kept on the top shelf of the pantry, behind the flour. Octavia had never once gone into my pantry. She thought the pantry was beneath her. The bag held my passport, my social security card, the originals of my college and graduate school diplomas, the deed to a property I'd bought 4 years ago that nobody in that house knew existed, and a black USB drive about the size of my thumbnail. I walked out the side door. I did not say goodbye. I did not slam it. I closed it behind me with the same care I had used to close it for 7 years. The snow was just starting to fall. I drove to Hartford. I parked the Lexus in Long Term and I got into the Honda. I drove to a Hampton Inn off I-91 and paid in cash and asked the night clerk, a woman named Doreen with a Christmas sweater and tired eyes, if she could recommend a quiet place to eat on Christmas Eve. She said, "Honey, it's all closed. I got half a turkey sandwich in the back if you want it." I said yes. We ate it together at the front desk. She told me her son had been deployed to Korea. I told her I'd just left my marriage. She said, "Smart girl. Eat your sandwich." I slept for 9 hours. I hadn't slept that long since I'd been married. Christmas morning, I woke up at 7. I made coffee in the little hotel pot. I opened my laptop. I sent 3 emails. The first was to a woman named Yolanda Briscoe. Yolanda was a divorce attorney in West Hartford. I had met her 4 years earlier at a continuing education conference, where I had been presenting a session on forensic accounting in matrimonial disputes. Because that, you see, is what I actually do for a living. I am a forensic accountant, a senior partner at a firm with offices in Hartford, Boston, and New York. I specialize in tracing hidden assets, undisclosed income, and the financial misconduct of people who are very, very confident they will never be caught. Octavia had told her friends for 7 years that I did some bookkeeping from home. Bram had told his colleagues that I was between things. Both of them said it because both of them had stopped listening to me sometime in our 2nd year of marriage, and after a while it was easier to let them tell whatever story made them comfortable. I had a corner office on the 18th floor of a building on Asylum Street. I had my own assistant. I had been featured, twice, in industry publications neither Bram nor Octavia had ever read. I made, at the time of that Christmas Eve dinner, about $420,000 a year before bonuses. Bram thought I made $42,000. He had once joked at a dinner party that he was carrying me. I had laughed because what else do you do? And I had gone home and written it in the notebook in the drawer. The second email was to my best friend from graduate school, Posey Lockridge. Posey was a litigator in Boston. She had been my emergency contact for 9 years. She had asked me 2 years earlier why I was still married to Bram. I had said, "I'm building something." She had said, "Okay, I trust you. Tell me when it's time." I had told her on December 23rd that it was almost time. She had said, "I'm ready when you are." The third email was to my mother. It said, "Mama, I left him. I'm safe. I'll call you in the morning. I love you." She wrote back at 7:09 a.m. She said, "About time, baby. Don't you go back for the china. We'll get you new dishes." But here's the thing about the china. I had taken it with me 3 weeks ago. 1 piece at a time, wrapped in tea towels in a tote bag, to the office. My assistant, a very calm woman named Glennis, had not asked a single question. She had simply found me an empty file cabinet in the storage room and let me fill it with pink roses on cream. Octavia did not know it yet, but the china on her Christmas Eve table had been the cheap reproductions I'd bought on eBay in October, hand-painted by a woman in Ohio, $8 a plate. They looked just like the originals, to Octavia, who did not, in 7 years, ever once turn over a plate to read the maker's mark. Now, the thing about the house. The Halverston Quinn estate in Litchfield County had been in Bram's family for 4 generations. I want you to know that I respected that. I did. There is something to a house that has held a family. But what Octavia did not know, and what Bram had been frantic to hide from her since the spring of the year I'm telling you about, was that the estate had been in serious financial trouble since the 2008 crash, and that Sterling had quietly mortgaged it 3 times. Once for a failed real estate venture in Florida, once to cover Bram's brother's gambling debts, once for reasons even I couldn't fully trace, though I had my suspicions. 4 years ago, when I first started keeping the notebook, I had also started doing some research. Public records mostly, deeds, liens, UCC filings, the kind of work I do every day for clients, but this time for myself. I found out that the second mortgage was about to default. I found out that Sterling had been negotiating with a private equity firm in Greenwich to take the estate as collateral on a personal loan, which is the kind of thing you do when you are out of options. I did something then that I have never told anyone except Posey and Yolanda and my mother. I bought the note, not personally, through a shell company registered in Delaware with a name so dull nobody would ever look twice. I paid the bank what they were owed. I assumed the lien. I did not foreclose. I did not announce myself. I simply let the family go on living in a house they no longer owned, paying interest to a creditor they could not identify. Sterling, I think, had some idea that something had changed. He had stopped meeting my eyes about 2 years ago, but he had never said a word, and Octavia had never noticed, and Brom, who had never read a financial document in his life, had certainly never noticed. For 4 years, I had been the silent landlord of my mother-in-law's ancestral home. Every time she made me feel small in that kitchen, every time she introduced me to her friends as Bram's wife, the one from the South, every time she sighed at my casserole dishes or asked me if I'd looked into a personal stylist, I had gone home and written it down, and paid the property tax, and held the note. I was not waiting for revenge. I want to be clear about that. I have been asked since by Yolanda, by Posey, by my mother, what I was waiting for, and the answer is that I wasn't waiting. I was simply unwilling to be unprepared. My mother raised me on a story about her own mother, my grandmother, the one who gave me the china. My grandmother had stayed in a marriage to a man who beat her for 30 years because she had nowhere to go and no money to go with. The morning he died, my grandmother got up and made herself a pot of coffee and didn't cry. My mother told me that story when I was 8. She said, "Linny, you never let yourself be in a position where you can't leave. Not for love, not for money, not for anyone. You hear me?" I heard her. So Christmas morning in the Hampton Inn off I-91, I sent the third email to my mother, and then I called Yolanda, who answered on the second ring, because I had warned her this might happen. "He did it," I said, "on Christmas Eve, in front of 12 people. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Linnea, I have to tell you, you have built one of the cleanest exit cases I have ever seen. We're going to be fine." "How fine?" "Bring me coffee at 9 and I'll show you fine." By 11 a.m., Christmas Day, we had filed for divorce in Hartford County under a no-fault statute. Yolanda walked me through the financial disclosures. Every account I had ever held, separate and joint. Every property, every line of credit. The prenuptial agreement Bram had laughed about signing because Octavia had insisted on it. The prenup that protected all separately held assets and any appreciation thereof. The prenup his mother had drafted herself with her family attorney and which Bram had signed without reading because his mother had said, "It's just protection, sweetheart, don't be silly." That prenup, drafted by Octavia's own attorney, kept every single dollar I had ever made and every single asset I had ever acquired entirely separate from the marital estate, including a shell company in Delaware, including a note on a house in Litchfield County. By 2 p.m., a registered letter was being prepared for personal service the next morning. The letter informed Sterling, as the named borrower of record, that the holder of the third mortgage on the Halverstein Quinn estate, the Bavaria Holdings, LLC, which was, in fact, named after my grandmother's china, a small private joke I do not regret, was calling the note. He had 90 days to satisfy the debt in full or to vacate the property. The note was $1.4 million plus accrued interest. Sterling did not have it. Sterling had never had it. That was the whole point. By 4 p.m., I called Bram. I let it go to voicemail. I left a message. I said, "Bram, it's Linnea. I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas and to let you know that the divorce paperwork has been filed and you will be served on Monday morning. Also, you may want to ask your father about the third mortgage. Take care." I hung up. I went to a movie. I saw The Holdovers. I cried twice and laughed once and bought a bag of popcorn just for me. The call started at 6:47 p.m. Bram first. Then Octavia. Then Bram again. Then Octavia's sister, a woman I had met 3 times. Then Sterling, which surprised me. Sterling had never once called me in 7 years. He left a message I have saved on a backup drive. He said, "Linnea, this is Sterling. I'd like to talk. Please." That was the whole message. A man who had said maybe 400 words to me total over 7 years, calling me on Christmas night, asking to talk. I did not pick up. By Monday morning, when Bram was served at the estate by a process server I had never met, the count was 47 calls and 112 text messages. Octavia had escalated from "Linnea, you are being childish," at 9 p.m. Christmas Day to "Please, for the love of God, call us back," by Sunday at midnight. By Monday afternoon, after Bram had read the divorce filing and the letter from Bavaria Holdings, the texts shifted tone again. Octavia's last one, the one I keep on a screenshot in a folder labeled Evidence, said, "Linnea, dear, we are family. There must be some misunderstanding. Please come home so we can discuss as adults. The carriage house can absolutely be reconsidered." The carriage house could absolutely be reconsidered. Marzette, by the way, vanished. Whatever Bram had promised her about the future of the Halverston Quinn estate, it did not survive a phone call with her own attorney once she understood the situation. By New Year's Day, she had moved out of the carriage house and back to New York. I heard later from Tilda, who became and remains a friend, that Marisette had been led to believe she would inherit the role of lady of the house. Marisette had not been informed that the house was held by a Delaware LLC. Marisette had not been informed of anything really except that Bram was tired of his trailer park wife. Sterling sold the estate in April to satisfy the note. Bavaria Holdings LLC recovered the principal plus interest, plus a modest profit, which I donated every dollar to the women's shelter in Hartford that my mother had once stayed in for 2 weeks in 1989, the time she finally left my father. I sent it anonymously. I did not need credit for it. The point had never been credit. Octavia and Sterling moved into a 2-bedroom in West Hartford. Bram moved into a 1-bedroom in Hartford proper and got a job at a marketing firm where his college roommate's father was a partner. He calls me every now and then, even now, 3 years later. He left a message in October that said, "Linny, I think about you a lot. I'm sorry, I really am." I don't return them. There is nothing to say. I forgive him. I do. I forgive all of them. Forgiveness is not the same as re-entry. The divorce was finalized in May. Yolanda was paid handsomely. Posey came down from Boston for the signing, and we drank champagne at a steakhouse, and she said, "You are the most patient woman I have ever known. Promise me you will never have to be that patient again." I promised. My mother came to stay with me for the summer. We unpacked my grandmother's china in a real house this time, a small craftsman bungalow in West Hartford I had bought in my own name, with my own money, with no shell company and no hidden ledger. We ate dinner off the Pink Roses every night. Sometimes we ate frozen pizza. Sometimes we ate scrambled eggs. My grandmother had been right. Every meal you eat is special if you eat it on something pretty. I want to say one last thing. People have asked me since how I could have stayed for 7 years knowing what I knew, building what I was building. They ask it like it's a moral question, like a stronger woman would have left in year 2. I don't begrudge the question, but I will tell you what I tell them. A stronger woman might have. I'm not a stronger woman. I'm just a careful one. I was raised by a woman who came up out of a marriage with nothing but her 2 hands and a daughter, and I watched her work her body into pieces to give me a life. I was not going to leave a marriage with nothing. I was not going to walk into a courtroom and beg for half of something I had built. I was not going to give Octavia Halverston Quinn the satisfaction of seeing me cry in her dining room. I was going to walk out on my own 2 feet, in my own coat, with my own keys, to my own car, to my own life. And I was going to do it on a night they chose, not a night I chose, because if I chose it, they would always say I had ambushed them, and I did not want to be ambushed back. There's a thing my grandmother used to say, the one who gave me the china. She used to say, "Baby girl, the Lord didn't make you to be a footstool. He made you to be a chair, and every now and then, you're going to have to remind people which is which." I think about that a lot now, especially around Christmas. I host my own Christmas now, small. 6 people. My mother, Posey, Tilda, Yolanda, Glennis from the office, and a man named August who I met a year ago at a bookstore in New Haven, who is kind and quiet and reads in bed and laughs at my jokes and does not, as far as I can tell, have a single hyphen in his name. The Wellington cousin makes the Wellington. It is magnificent. I make the pies. We use the pink rose china. My mother says grace and then she says, every year, the same thing. She says, baby, this is the prettiest table I've ever sat at. And it is. People ask me sometimes if I regret the 7 years. 7 Christmases at the Halverston Quinn estate. 7 sets of ironed linens. 7 cheese courses I learned to assemble because Octavia said a proper table required one. They ask me as if those years were wasted, as if a stronger woman would have walked out in year 2 or year 3 after the first cruel comment about my trailer park upbringing. I don't see it that way. Not anymore. Here is what I have come to believe. Every choice we make, big or small, plants a seed. Bram chose, year after year, to laugh when his mother made me small. He chose to tell his colleagues I was between things. He chose, in the end, to toast our divorce in front of 12 people on Christmas Eve, because he believed, deep down, that I would shatter. Those choices were seeds. They grew into the moment he had to face me through an attorney in May. Octavia chose to humiliate me in her own dining room for 7 years, and her choices grew into a 2-bedroom apartment in West Hartford. Marzette chose to slip into a married man's life and call it love, and her choices grew into a quiet exit back to New York with nothing but her embarrassment. None of that was punishment from anyone. It was simply the harvest of what they had planted. And me. I made choices too. I chose, every time Octavia cut me, to write it down instead of cry. I chose to keep my career instead of letting them shrink it into bookkeeping from home. I chose to buy a note on a house. I chose to stash a Honda in long-term parking and keep a passport behind the flower. None of those were acts of revenge. They were acts of preparation. There is a difference. Revenge is loud and ugly and asks to be witnessed. Preparation is quiet and patient and asks for nothing. My grandmother used to say that strength is not the same as loudness. She said the strongest tree on the mountain is the one with the deepest roots, and you cannot see the roots. I think about her every time I set my table now. I think about my mother, who left my father with 2 hands and a daughter, and who taught me that a woman who cannot leave is a woman who must learn how. I think about the girl I was at 24, signing a prenup I didn't understand, agreeing to a hyphen I didn't believe in, marrying into a family that would never see me. I do not pity her. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. But I do thank her, because somewhere in those 7 years, while she ironed napkins and held her tongue, she was also reading deeds and saving receipts and building a life that nobody could take from her. If I could say one thing to the woman watching this, the woman who is tired, the woman who is being made small in her own kitchen, it would be this: do not wait to be rescued. Do not wait to be believed. Build quietly. Keep a notebook. Keep a key they don't know about. Keep your name on something that is yours. The day you need it will come, and it will come on a night you did not choose, and you will be ready.